exactly how it happened. His boots hit the concrete hard. 1 step, 2 steps. The hallway stretches ahead of him like it always does, cold, gray, humming with that low institutional buzz that never really goes away. He's done this walk 100 times, maybe 1,000. But tonight something feels off. The drilling. It had been going on for days, loud enough to rattle teeth, loud enough that inmates in nearby cells had been banging on their doors, screaming for it to stop. And yet, nobody did anything. Nobody checked. Nobody asked where it was coming from. He reaches cell 20. He unlocks the door, pushes it open, and freezes. The bed is empty. The GPS bracelet, the one strapped to the ankle of the most wanted man on the planet, is just sitting there on the mattress, still blinking, like it's waiting for someone to notice. No alarms, no alerts, no sign of a struggle, just silence. Stay with me, because what happened next, and everything that led up to that moment, is one of the most jaw-dropping, meticulously engineered, flat-out insane stories you will ever hear. We're talking about a billionaire, a fake construction site, a GPS watch disguised as a gift from his wife, and a tunnel so precisely built it had a margin of error of less than half an inch. And somehow, nobody saw any of it coming. How does the world's most wanted man walk out of the most secure prison in Mexico without a single alarm going off? That's exactly what we're about to get into. But before we do, drop a comment right now. Do you think any prison can truly hold a billionaire? I want to see your answer before this story is over, because by the end of this video, you might want to change it. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel. We've got lots of escape documentaries for you. To understand how he escaped, you first have to understand who he was and where he came from. Picture the most remote place you can imagine. No paved roads, no running water, no real future. Now make it worse. That's La Tuna, a tiny mountain village buried deep in the Sierra Madre of Sinaloa, Mexico. A place so isolated that most people who are born there die there, having never left. The kind of place the rest of the world doesn't just ignore, it doesn't even know exists. Joaquín Archivaldo Guzmán Loera was born there on the 4th of April, 1957, the eldest of 7 children. His father, Emilio, was a cattle rancher and an opium farmer. He was also violent and unpredictable and barely present. His mother, Maria Consuelo, was the opposite. She was the one holding everything together with nothing. Joaquín dropped out of school after 3rd grade, couldn't read properly, couldn't write much either. By the time most kids his age were learning multiplication tables, he was out in the fields, selling oranges on the roadside just to help the family eat. But here's the thing about growing up in Sinaloa in the 1960s. The drug trade wasn't some distant, shadowy underworld. It was the economy. Poppy fields weren't hidden, they were just farms, and everyone knew someone who worked them. By the time he was 15, Joaquín wasn't selling oranges anymore. He was running his own small marijuana plantation alongside his cousins, the Beltran Leyva brothers. Remember that name? It comes back around later in ways nobody expected. His father eventually kicked him out. He moved in with his grandfather, and that's when his uncle, Pedro Aviles Perez, one of the original pioneers of Mexican drug trafficking, opened a door that would never close again. Pedro didn't just introduce him to the trade, he handed him a blueprint. This wasn't a man born into power, he was born into dirt floors and poppy fields, and he clawed his way up with nothing but ruthlessness and raw intelligence. No connections, no education, no safety net, just hunger, and an almost terrifying ability to learn. But the boy from La Tuna was about to meet the machine that would turn him into a monster. He didn't walk into the Guadalajara cartel as a boss. He walked in as a driver. That's it, a chauffeur, fetching people, running errands, keeping his mouth shut and his eyes open. But his boss, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, the man they called El Padrino, the Godfather, he noticed something in this quiet kid from the mountains, an instinct, a coldness, a brain that was always 3 steps ahead. So he promoted him, then promoted him again. By his late 20s, Guzmán wasn't driving anyone anywhere. He was running logistics for the most powerful drug organization in Mexico. Then 1985 happened. A DEA agent named Enrique Camarena was kidnapped, tortured for 30 hours, and murdered, allegedly on Felix Gallardo's orders. The fallout was catastrophic. The U.S. came down hard. The Mexican government, embarrassed and pressured, started making arrests. The Guadalajara cartel began to crack, and Guzmán? He didn't panic. He positioned. In 1989, the cartel's top figures gathered in Acapulco to divide up territories before everything collapsed entirely. Guzmán walked out of that meeting with the Sinaloa Corridor, one of the most valuable drug trafficking routes on the continent. The Sinaloa Cartel was born, and he was running it. What he built over the next 2 decades was, by any measure, extraordinary and horrifying. He pioneered border tunnels that ran hundreds of feet underground, fully ventilated, electrified, with rail systems to move product efficiently. Sound familiar? He used narco submarines, catapults that launched cocaine bundles over border fences, shipments disguised inside chili pepper cans, frozen jalapenos, even fake carrots. The man treated drug smuggling like a logistics problem, and he solved it better than anyone before him. By 2009, Forbes magazine put him on their billionaire list. They kept him there for 4 straight years. The DEA publicly compared his reach and influence to Pablo Escobar. 7 separate U.S. federal indictments, Chicago, Miami, New York, San Diego, Texas, and he was still operating freely. But the numbers that matter most aren't the billions. They're the 34,000 deaths attributed to his cartel's wars. Politicians assassinated in broad daylight. Entire towns emptied through fear. Rivals dissolved in acid, so there was nothing left to identify. This wasn't just a drug empire. It was a shadow government, with a bigger budget and fewer rules. The same engineering genius he used to move cocaine under the U.S. border, he would one day use to move himself under a prison wall. But empires attract enemies, and in 1993, on El Chapo's first fall from power, would set the stage for everything that followed. In June of 1993, the party ended. Guatemalan authorities caught him trying to slip across the border and handed him straight to Mexico. The charges were serious: murder, drug trafficking. The judge handed down a 20-year sentence and sent him to Puente Grande, one of Mexico's highest security federal prisons. And that's where most stories like this would end. Not this one. Because here's what the Mexican government apparently didn't fully account for. You can put El Chapo behind bars, but you cannot put his money behind bars with him. Within months, Puente Grande wasn't really a prison anymore. Not for him. It was an office. Guards were on his payroll. Conjugal visits happened whenever he wanted. He ordered food from outside restaurants. He ran cartel operations through a steady stream of corrupt officers who carried his messages in and out like personal assistants. When anyone pushed back, when a guard tried to actually do their job, the threats came fast and they came hard. Then on the 19th of January, 2001, he simply left. Exactly how is still debated. Some say he hid inside a laundry cart. Others say he walked straight out wearing a guard's uniform. What everyone agrees on is this: corrupt officers didn't just look the other way. They escorted him out. Dozens of prison staff were implicated. Some were arrested. Most of the full story was never told. He vanished for 13 years. 13 years. A combined reward of $8.8 million on his head. I'm the full resources of the Mexican government hunting him, and nothing. Until February 22, 2014, when a small mistake cracked everything open. His bodyguard, a man known as El Condor, made a phone call he shouldn't have. Mexican Navy Special Forces triangulated the signal to a beachside condo in Mazatlan. They stacked up outside the door, breached it, and found him inside. No weapons drawn, no dramatic last stand. Laser sights dancing across his chest. A dozen rifles locked on one calm face. El Chapo didn't flinch. Mexico refused to extradite him to the United States, flat out. Officials publicly declared he would serve 300 to 400 years in a Mexican prison before the Americans ever got their hands on him. They wanted the world to know they had him, that this time it was over. So they sent him to Altiplano, Mexico's answer to Alcatraz, the prison they said no one could escape from. They were wrong. Let me paint you a picture of this place. Altiplano Federal Prison sits about 50 miles west of Mexico City, officially known as Centro Federal de Readaptación Social Número 1. But nobody calls it that. Everyone just calls it Altiplano. And when Mexican officials needed somewhere to put their most dangerous, most embarrassing, most high-profile prisoner, this is where they pointed. From the outside, it looks less like a prison and more like a military installation. 20-plus steel doors between the entrance and the cell blocks, each one requiring separate authorization to pass through. Walls 3 feet thick. Snipers positioned around the clock. A no-fly zone overhead. The armored personnel carriers on permanent standby in the courtyard. And a cell signal jamming system that killed every phone frequency within a 6-mile radius. To get to El Chapo's cell, you pass through more security checkpoints than most nuclear facilities. Cell 20 was 60 square feet. Bed, sink, shower. That's it. One overhead camera monitored every inch of the space, except for one small area near the shower, where a chest-high privacy wall created the only blind spot in the entire cell. A detail that seemed completely insignificant at the time. He was locked down 23 hours a day. GPS ankle bracelet. Guards hand-picked from a vetted pool, rotated under constant supervision to prevent any relationships forming with the prisoner. The whole system was specifically designed with one man in mind. On paper, genuinely escape-proof. But here's what the architects of that system forgot to account for. El Chapo wasn't just a prisoner. He was a billionaire surrounded by men earning $600 a month. And he knew exactly what that meant. He'd known his whole life what that meant. Meanwhile, the pressure from Washington was building. The U.S. extradition requests were piling up, and El Chapo understood better than anyone that the moment he landed on American soil, it was over. No bribes, no tunnels, no escape. The clock wasn't just ticking, it was screaming. 16 months. That's all it took. While guards watched every inch of that cell, nobody was watching what was happening 1 mile beneath their feet. Every great escape needs an inside man. Bar El Chapo's was named Damaso Lopez Nunez, but the cartel called him El Licenciado, the graduate, and the nickname wasn't ironic. This man was sharp, calculated, and he knew exactly where every door, every camera, every structural weakness in the Mexican federal prison system was located, because he used to run one. Lopez Nunez had been the deputy director of Puente Grande, the same prison El Chapo walked out of in 2001. Investigators actually blamed him for that escape, but instead of going to prison himself, he disappeared into the Sinaloa Cartel and spent the next 13 years rising through the ranks until he became El Chapo's chief of staff. And he kept the blueprints, not just for Puente Grande, for Altiplano too. So when El Chapo arrived at Altiplano in February of 2014, the planning didn't start weeks later, it started almost immediately. His wife, Emma Coronel, young, elegant, a former beauty queen, began making regular prison visits. On the surface, a devoted wife supporting her husband. Underneath, she was the communication line. Messages went in, instructions came out. The cartel was already listening, already planning. The first move was real estate. A piece of land was purchased in Santa Juanita, a quiet, unremarkable neighborhood about a mile from the prison, under a fake name. A small construction house was built on it. Nothing flashy, nothing suspicious. Just another building going up in a Mexican suburb. Police cars drove past it regularly. Nobody looked twice. Inside that house, 12 men were preparing to go underground. This wasn't a crew of desperate amateurs with shovels. On these were trained operators. The digging team had been sent to Germany, yes, Germany, to train under criminal engineers who specialized in precision excavation, and they came back with a piece of equipment that sounds more like something from a spy thriller than a prison break. The Leica Total Station, a laser-guided mapping device so precise it operates with a margin of error of less than half an inch. Imagine threading a needle from a mile away, underground, in complete darkness. That's what this machine made possible. Now let me walk you through what they actually built. The tunnel ran 5.5 feet tall, enough to walk through hunched, 2.5 feet wide, 33 feet below the surface. It stretched approximately 1.5 kilometers from the Santa Juanita house directly toward Altiplano. Inside, over 300 specialized dim bulbs lighting the entire length. A PVC ventilation system pumping fresh air throughout. Steel rail tracks running the full distance. A motorcycle mounted on those rails to move men and materials quickly. The generator powering all of it, disguised as a BBQ pit outside the construction house. Every single day, the crew removed 1,440 cubic feet of dirt. And they didn't just dump it. They blended it carefully with surface soil so that no unusual mounds, no suspicious piles, nothing would catch anyone's eye from above. After 13 months of digging, they breached the outer prison walls. And then hit a problem. They were underneath Altiplano, but they couldn't pinpoint exactly where El Chapo's shower blind spot was, that 2-square-foot area. From a mile away, on underground with no GPS signal penetrating the concrete above them, they were close but not close enough. Breaking through in the wrong spot meant cameras, guards, immediate capture. They needed a precise coordinate. They needed a signal from inside the cell itself. That's where the watch came in. For months, El Chapo had been playing a very specific role, polite, cooperative, helpful to guards, never causing problems, never making demands, always saying thank you. Model prisoner behavior, the kind that makes guards relax, drop their guard, start seeing you as a person rather than a threat. It was all calculated, every single smile. So when Emma arrived one day with a gift, a simple Casio watch, the guards saw no reason to refuse it. Why would they? He'd been nothing but cooperative. It was just a watch. It wasn't just a watch. Embedded inside was a GPS tracker. El Chapo carried it to the shower, set it down in the exact corner of the blind spot, left it there. 1 mile underground, the Leica Total Station locked the coordinates. He wasn't being kind. He was being strategic. Every smile, every favor, every polite exchange with every guard. It was all part of the plan. At this point in the story, I need you to pause and actually think about this. This tunnel took 17 months to build. It cost an estimated $7 million. It required a trained engineering crew, precision laser equipment, a fake real estate purchase, and a GPS watch smuggled through one of the most secure prisons in Mexico. Could any prison in the world have stopped this level of planning? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because what happens next is where this story gets truly unbelievable. July 11th, 2015. The tunnel is ready, the coordinates are locked, and El Chapo has one final move to make, 8:52 p.m. That's the last time stamp on the security footage. El Chapo moving casually toward the shower area. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. Just a prisoner doing what prisoners do. Then he steps behind the privacy wall and disappears. One ladder, 33 feet straight down into the dark. At the bottom, a lit tunnel, ventilated, fully operational, stretching 1.5 kilometers toward freedom. He climbs onto the motorcycle cart, and the rails carry him through the underground passage his crew spent 17 months building just for this moment. On 12 minutes, maybe 15, then he surfaces inside the Santa Juanita construction house, changes clothes, walks out. A truck is waiting. 2 hours later, a remote airstrip, 2 planes on the tarmac, 1 decoy, 1 reel. He boards the real one. He is airborne before a single alarm goes off inside Altiplano. Back at the prison, 40 minutes pass. A guard stares at the monitor. Something feels wrong, too still, too quiet. He walks the corridor, reaches cell 20, pushes the door open. The GPS bracelet is blinking on the mattress. Then, chaos. Alarm screaming, red lights flooding the block, boots hammering concrete in every direction, guards flooding the cell, the corridor, the yard. But there's nothing to find. No trail, no trace. He's already gone. Our president, Enrique Peña Nieto, was in the middle of a state visit in France when the call came through. He had to cut it short and fly home to face the cameras. The embarrassment wasn't just national, it was global. Every news outlet on the planet ran the same headline. Toluca Airport shut down. Mexico City Airport, occupied by soldiers. Operation Black Swan launched. The most powerful drug lord in modern history had just made the entire Mexican government look like amateurs. And the world was watching every second of it. The fallout inside Altiplano was immediate and brutal. 34 prison staff were detained within days. 22 were formally charged. The prison director, Valentin Cardenas Lerma, was implicated directly. The former head of Mexico's entire federal prison system was arrested. Investigators started pulling threads, and the more they pulled, the worse it looked. The corruption hadn't just existed, it had been structural. The United States offered everything: drones, surveillance technology, intelligence assets, special operations support. Mexico said no, sovereignty. They would handle it themselves. For 6 months, nothing. No trail, no credible sightings, no intercepted communications, no whispers from informants. El Chapo had vanished so completely it was as if he'd never existed. The most wanted man on the planet, with the resources of 2 governments hunting him, had gone completely dark. Then Hollywood got involved, and I genuinely could not make this up. A Mexican actress named Kate del Castillo, famous, well-connected, and publicly sympathetic to El Chapo, was contacted by his lawyers. And they wanted to arrange a meeting. She brought along a friend, Sean Penn, the Academy Award-winning actor, who wanted to interview El Chapo for Rolling Stone magazine. In October of 2015, they flew to a remote mountain hideout and sat across from the world's most wanted fugitive for hours. El Chapo, on camera, looked directly at Penn and said, "I supply more heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana than anybody else in the world." He said it like he was proud, but while he was busy performing for the cameras, his cell phone was pinging off towers. Mexican Marines triangulated the signal to a ranch in Durango. They moved in. El Chapo escaped through a gully, with reports still disputed that he used a child as cover during the retreat. But the net was tightening. On locals near a mountain hideout called The Sky reported armed men moving at night. A radio intercept picked up a code name: Tia, Ant. The target was confirmed. El Chapo's own vanity, his desperate desire to have his story told on film, to be seen as something more than a criminal, is what led them straight to him. Someone ordered a suspiciously large amount of tacos at midnight. That's what cracked it open. Surveillance teams had been watching a house in Los Mochis, a coastal city in Sinaloa. On the 8th of January, 2016, 17 Mexican Navy Special Forces hit the property before dawn. 5 cartel members died in the firefight. El Chapo was already moving. He'd slipped through a tunnel hidden beneath a bathtub, again, and surfaced on the street, carjacking a vehicle and pushing south. A statewide alert went out. Federal police intercepted the car 20 kilometers outside the city. He tried everything: cash, property, cartel jobs for their families. Every officer refused. Then came the threats. "You're all going to die." Every officer refused again. Word came in, 40 assassins were already en route. The officers made a decision: roadside motel, handcuffed to a radiator, wait for Marines. Headlights swept through the window. El Chapo looked up and smiled, thinking his men had finally arrived. It was the Marines. He was flown back to Altiplano, the exact prison he'd escaped from 6 months earlier. And here's the detail that still stuns me. Lopez Nunez had already put down $100,000 toward planning a second escape. Extradition approval came through before he got the chance. Shot on the 19th of January, 2017, exactly 16 years to the day after his first escape from Puente Grande, El Chapo was extradited to the United States. A judge who had ruled against the extradition was assassinated during the proceedings. No confirmed connection. Make of that what you will. The Brooklyn trial ran from November 2018 through February 12, 2019. Guilty on all counts. Life plus 30 years. $12.6 billion in forfeiture ordered. He now sits in ADX Florence, Colorado, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Concrete furniture, 1,400 remote-controlled doors, solitary confinement, a fortified outdoor cage for recreation. No tunnels possible. The facility was specifically engineered to make underground excavation detectable within hours. In 2025, his legal team filed claims of deteriorating health, high blood pressure, insomnia, severe anxiety. Prison officials denied it. Emma Coronel was arrested in 2021 for helping run cartel operations and smuggling messages to El Chapo from prison. She served 3 years and walked free in 2023. His sons, the ones who oversaw the tunnel construction, are falling one by one. Ovidio extradited in 2023. Joaquín arrested in El Paso in 2024. The Sinaloa Cartel remains the single largest drug supplier into the United States. El Chapo is in a box, but the empire he built, that's still very much alive. So, how does something like this actually get prevented? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Altiplano didn't fail because of bad architecture. It failed because of bad decisions made by human beings. And that's a much harder problem to solve. Start with the 40-minute detection gap. 40 minutes passed before anyone noticed El Chapo was gone. His crew had been drilling for days, loud enough that inmates were complaining. AI-powered audio and motion detection systems would have flagged abnormal vibrations and sounds within the first hour of digging. Not days later. Not never. The technology existed. Nobody deployed it. Then there's the blind spot. One chest-high privacy wall. That's all it took. Full-cell camera coverage with 0 architectural gaps is now a baseline recommendation for any high-value prisoner. It wasn't then. The GPS watch should never have entered that cell, not without complete forensic disassembly. 0 personal items from outside. 0 without a full technical inspection. One oversight gifted the tunnel crew their coordinates. And then there's the $600 a month problem. You cannot pay guards poverty wages to contain billionaires and act surprised when corruption follows. Financial monitoring, mandatory rotation schedules, and anonymous internal reporting systems aren't optional extras. They're the foundation. Finally, El Chapo spent 16 months in the same cell. 16 months. Unpredictable, mandatory cell rotations would have disrupted the tunnel's targeting entirely. That single protocol change alone might have stopped everything. And at the international level, sovereignty standoffs cost critical time. A preemptive extradition for high-value targets isn't just a legal preference. It's a security necessity. Every flaw in Altiplano wasn't a design failure. It was a human failure. And that's the hardest thing to fix, because you can reinforce walls, upgrade cameras, and install sensors. But you cannot legislate integrity. So here's my question for you. Given everything you just heard, do you think ADX Florence can truly hold El Chapo forever? Or is he already thinking 3 moves ahead, right now, in that concrete cell? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. If this story blew your mind, share it with someone who loves true crime. And subscribe, because next week we're covering another escape that makes this one look like a warm-up. I'll see you there.